¿Cómo está el negocio? They got families and they want the best for them, for their children to have a good education, good health system, and all this stuff we have in the United States is good for them to have it too.
The mission at times has added challenges. Extreme heat can often dictate how much work is done.
It's very hot. We were in Iraq for a long time, and it's hot compared to that.
But ask almost anyone involved with Exercise New Horizon, and they'll tell you it's work they'll gladly do again.
Sometimes we feel like we're not helping a lot, but when I find out some of the things that can happen when you deworm these kids and the amount of growth that they can get and they have a chance to develop normally, yeah, it's worth it.
I love helping these people. They respect help in any way they can get it because they've been without for so long.
Were the repeated relief activities in 2005 too much for the Department of Defense? And what's in store for the days ahead? The answers are up next. We've already discussed the U.S. military's biggest jobs in 2005, from hurricane, tsunami, and earthquake relief to progress made in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now let's examine the impact those operations had on how the Department of Defense does business and find out what's in store for the days ahead. Throughout 2005, U.S. military men and women raced to provide help to the victims of one mammoth natural disaster after another. They saw firsthand the horrors inflicted by tsunamis, earthquakes, and closer to home, hurricanes.
Never had a year where we had almost 80,000 citizen soldiers deployed overseas in the global war on terrorism in Afghanistan and Iraq and the Horn of Africa, as well as keeping the peace in the Balkans and the Sinai, and at the same time having as many as 50,000 at its peak responding to Katrina and Rita.
One question raised during Hurricane Katrina relief operations focused on whether or not the immense military response hampered operations elsewhere in any way. The Defense Department says there was plenty of room to expand operations if needed.
When you've got a total force with a large active force and a large Guard and Reserve, you can mobilize Guard and Reserve for short periods like we did for Katrina. And there were still 200,000 to 300,000 Guard and Reserve who could have been drawn on had they been needed. So I think that we do have that capability, and we also have that desire as a country to want to be able to provide assistance.
2005 definitely wasn't a typical year for the U.S. military, nor for the millions of civilians they helped around the world.
When you look at all the things that the U.S. military has done this year, it's incredible how flexible and how responsive the force has been, and how good they've been at each of those very diverse missions.
Ordinary is extraordinary. You know what I'm saying? This is what we do.
Even as the military responded to one natural disaster after another, missions in Iraq and Afghanistan continued, with considerable progress reported in both countries. Historic elections were held, and much progress was also made in training their security forces to take over when U.S. forces leave. As for the near future, Iraq's new government, elected in December, is only just settling in, and many questions are, as yet, unanswered.
The critical questions are the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Interior, and making sure that the chains of command and the structure is functioning effectively so that we can continue to pass off responsibility to the Iraqi security forces, both the police and the army.
But when the time arrives that U.S. forces can leave Iraq, what that withdrawal will look like is still anyone's guess.
And it's really up to them. We have no desire for permanent bases in that country. We'll see what happens in Iraq, whether to what extent they want some quick reaction force assistance or some deterrent with respect to their neighbors or training of their troops. And then we would decide what's in our interest and what's in their interest.
In Afghanistan, the status of U.S. forces is clearer. In December, the Department of Defense announced plans to reduce the 19,000 troops serving there by about 2,500 in 2006. a direct result of progress made in that country.
Worked with President Karzai, and he came to us and said he wanted us, the United States and the coalition countries, NATO, to keep a presence there for a period. And we have a base in Bagram, and we have a base in Kandahar. So there are 2 or 3 things we're doing in Afghanistan at the request of the Afghan government.
Despite ongoing debate in 2005 over the issue of troop withdrawals from Iraq and Afghanistan, military leaders say support for the men and women getting the job done in those countries remains strong.
Don't care what political affiliation you are, as long as you support what they do, that's all they care about. And that's a morale factor. And right now, I'm proud to say morale is very, very high. And we get a lot of support.
We're going to lead up a gunshot.
Now, the Sergeant Major's got that exactly right. And in addition, it's very important to the families to know that the sacrifice of their loved one is appreciated here at home.
Based on personal experience in Iraq and recent conversations with troops there, the new senior enlisted advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff says he believes there is one thing that could help the U.S. public better understand the mission.
Folks that report only bad have not been there to see the good. Maybe it's time to flip the coin over and look at some of the good stuff.
That's Alpha Microphone. How copy? Clear out, me.
When it comes to goals for the new year, many, like the missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, are carryovers from 2005.
We have to also continue transforming this great institution so that we can shift our weight more towards irregular warfare and the kinds of challenges we're likely to meet in the 21st century. We have to continue to refine our ability to contribute to homeland defense because of the threats of weapons of mass destruction in the hands of terrorists and rogue states. We have to continue to see that we are able to attract and retain the kinds of talents that we need. We have to continue to make adjustments that will enable our military to be swift and agile and deployable.
Other goals could affect military men and women more directly.
In 06, we have to give soldiers, sailors, Marine, airmen, and Coast Guard, coasties as they want me to call them, we got to give them responsibility. We got to give them the authority to be responsible. Got it? We got to hold them accountable for what they do, good and bad, and we got to assist them when they fall. They need us to do that for them.
The ever-increasing role played by Guard and Reserve forces in U.S. military operations around the world and their need for more and better equipment is another tough problem the Department of Defense will tackle this year.
It's not an easy problem. It's not a cheap problem. It's in the billions of dollars. Today we're an operational force. You have to have the equipment you need because when they call you, you got to be able to go in a minute.
As for the operations tempo the total force faces today and the ability of keeping up that pace,
We are capable of maintaining that, but we need to be smart about it. We need to make sure that when we ask our active Guard and Reserve service members to go do a mission, that the mission is one that is worthy of their effort and that we respect their time, especially if they're coming in the Guard and Reserve.
There's no question that enormous challenges lay ahead for the Department of Defense and its men and women in uniform. But when you compare all that was faced and achieved in 2005, looking to the future may seem less daunting.
The impact they've had in South Asia at the tsunami and in Pakistan and in the Gulf states in the United States, the fact that they've liberated over 50 million people, the fact that they're creating an environment where these countries can develop a democracy and provide all of their people, no matter their sex or their religion, an opportunity to enjoy the benefits of a free system, has to be noble work. They know it's noble work. They're proud of it, and they should be.